Good morning. Let's take a stab at clarifying different points of view, which one is correct and which are not, which are biblical, which are not, about the book of life, the final book of life, and other books. Table of contents is where we're starting. Here's how we got there. The home page, index for B. Scroll on down to Book of Life. And just click on it. And here's your table of contents. The introduction has a summary chart and notes to it, which we can look at later. Let's get to some of the key points, and then this summary chart will give you on the left-hand side the summary statements that are in the study, and then the passages that are in view relative to an evolving book of life, one that changes as time goes by until we get to the final book of life at the end of the age. That will be explained as we go into some of these notes. Here's some key notes. John 3:16-18 and 2 Peter 3:9 all must have this opportunity to be saved during their physical life. So in John 3:16-18, names of unsaved are blotted out just after physical death. Then in Psalm 69:19-28, the blotting out means a final erasure not to be written back in. And in Revelation 3:5, it's an exaggeration for emphasis. We have rewards in view for overcoming, being blotted out, irreversible, eternal condemnation. So if you're blotted out, you don't get a chance to be written back in. In Revelation 13:8, people who worship the beast designated as irrevocably destined for the lake of fire has to do with God's election, the final book of life. In Revelation 17:8, in view is the final book of life. Revelation 20:15 and 21:27, the book of life at the end of history, in which all in that final book will go to heaven who are written in it. The rest have been blotted out. In Revelation 22:19, those we do not have a reference to the book of life. That's another book. In Exodus 32:31-33, we do not have reference to the book of life. It's another book. And point 10, babies in the womb and infants and individuals before accountability who die must be written in the book of life at creation. They don't have a chance to choose or not choose to believe Jesus died for their sins. Finally, point 11, multiple blotting and rewriting is not permitted. These are summary notes. We can check back when you get to this chart, and they're explained under several categories. Here we have the first category, which is point 2. All men have an opportunity to be saved during their physical lifetimes. 2 Peter 3:9 and John 3:16-18. Point 3. Names are written in the book of life only at the creation of the world at no other time. So the final book of life has all names written in it at the time of the creation of the world and at no other time. Then those are blotted out through the course of history, the ages. And we have the final book where it only has those that have chosen to believe in Jesus, payment for their sins. Revelation 13:8 and Revelation 17:8 have this in view. The evolving book of life has all names written in it, at least at the time of conception, most likely at the creation of the world and at no other time. So in these passages you see below, we have various places in, especially the book of the Revelation, and then Psalm 69:19-28 as the evolving book of life, Revelation 3:5, John 3:16-18, and 2 Peter 3:9 has the evolving book of life in view. We have to be very careful how we read these. Context is all important. So in point C, the Bible does not indicate anywhere that once you are saved, then you are written in the book of life. We have some key passages here. No one then can be erased from the book of life in his physical lifetime. He has to be given a chance throughout his life, his mortal life, to believe, even at the point of death. Once you're blotted out, it is evident that it is a permanent blotting out. You don't get a chance to get put back in. So long as an individual is in the book of life, he has an opportunity to be saved. If not, he's not. Got that opportunity. And he must be dead, because God gives you an opportunity throughout your life. He's not willing anyone should perish. Now, in the evolving book of life, all men are saved at conception and are written in the evolving book of life at that time. So you have an opportunity during your physical lifetime. John 3:16-18 and 2 Peter 3:9 are the stalwart backups for this. Those who will never be saved are written in the evolving book of life. Psalm 69:19-28. And if they go through their whole lives and don't choose to believe, they're blotted out as soon as they pass into the next life. Point C, those who will be saved are written in the book and are unsaved at conception, as all of us are. At conception, we don't have an opportunity to believe. We don't have that capacity until a number of years after we're born and grow up a little bit. John 3:16-18, Psalm 58:3, and Psalm 51:5 point this out. Point D, those who die before birth, in infancy, or before accountability, are conceived as unsaved, yet must be written in the book of life because all three groups will be saved. If you die before birth or in infancy, you don't have the opportunity to grow up to be accountable, to choose or not choose to believe in Jesus. The evolving book of life at the end of time has only those who are saved throughout history in it. Revelation 20 and 15. The absence of one's name appearing in the book of life indicates that one must prove that one's own life was worthy to be let into heaven. So at judgment, at the great white throne judgment, you're going to be confronted and the book of life is opened up and your name's not in it. So then you must show that you've been worthy enough to be let into heaven, which is not going to happen. All men are sinful. And here are a number of passages that indicate this, consistent with it. G, he who overcomes will surely not be blotted out of the book of life, and his name will be confessed before the Father and the angels. That's a rewards view. Revelation 3:3-5 is where that passage is located. So you look at the loss of salvation view, it just doesn't hold up. You can't lose your salvation because once you believed, you have eternal life at that moment. So there's a couple of things here to look at and figure out which one best suits the overcoming will not be blotted out. The passage in Revelation 3:3-5. So the final book of life was written from the foundation of the world, Revelation 3:8. The final book of life is a final book which has no erasures, whose content is different from the evolving book of life until the end of time. Those who will be saved are written in the final book of life, but are unsaved at conception. Those who worship the beast will not be saved by God's election. So they have the opportunity to be saved, and when they die, their names are erased. The book of life at the end of time is identical to the final book of life, which was written in before the foundation of the world. Other passages do not refer to the book of life or the Lamb's book of life. Lamb's book of life is another term meaning the final book of life. And in Exodus 32, 31 to 33, this does not refer to the book of life. And there are other books in Revelation 20 and 12, which are not part of the book of life, but are books that record the behavior of the individual, from which God can show how that individual stands up to the perfect righteousness of Christ. And if they don't, which inevitably, if you get graded on that, you're a sinful person, you die, you don't have enough righteousness of your own to be earning eternal life. Typical arguments against the book of life to support the loss of salvation are made, and this is the section on that. You can read these arguments and the refutation of that argument, because these are not biblical. For example, point 3, simply slipping into sin and being repentant does not constitute losing your salvation, but one can turn with no desire to ever serve God again. But nevertheless, if you believed, according to hundreds of passages, John 3:16 to begin with, you have eternal life. If you've lost it in 10 years of unrepentant behavior, you didn't have eternal life, you had 10-year life. There are many passages in point 6 that describe falling from grace. Yes, out of the grace provision God has for you in your temporal life with blessings, you could fall out of grace of God and be disciplined. But you'll be a disciplined, poor child of God, not an unsaved person. You haven't lost your salvation. Well, let's go back and take a look at that chart. Summary chart notes. This, in the left page, you can read, and then you look at the two kinds of books. The evolving one, from the creation of the world, everybody's name is written in it that will ever be conceived. And the final book of life, people have gone through their ages and their lives, temporal life. Some have believed, and they remain in the book of life. Some have not, and the names will be blotted out, to go before the great white throne judgment, to be judged on the basis of their works. Other books are open, as it says in the book of the Revelation, and you'll be judged according to whether or not your righteousness meets God's standards, which it inevitably will not. So you can go through this passage. This is a good summary of the entire history of this study.